Sciences at Wake Forest, and I am presenting to you job considerations for international students. I particularly honed in on this for students in the ITS department, and let's get into it. All right. So before we go any further, I do want to be sure that you know who your on-campus support is regarding like the paperwork for OPT or CPT. And so this is one person I've been in touch with, Carrie O'Brien. Hopefully you know her as well. I just wanted to make sure you have her information going forward. I'm not going to be an expert on that part of the process. I'm going to be sharing a bit more of strategies for you to employ to find opportunities and hopefully secure them. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up. And then, of course, her website is there as well. There's some information on it. I know that she does workshops on kind of the nuts and bolts of OPT and want to be sure that you're accessing that information. Okay. So really, before you get too far into a job search, these are some good questions to ask yourself, and particularly thinking about your goals, right? So how is your academic experience in the U.S. what you expected, and how is it different? How has your job or internship search, if you are already searching, been what you expected, and how is it different? How important is working in the United States to you, and how does the American process for finding jobs differ from the process in your home country? So that's something you can think about even as I go through a bit of the American process for finding jobs. What seems to be a popular career path for your peers or other Wake Forest students, and how does that affect your own process? So this comes to my mind, especially in terms of translation and interpreting, because a lot of those jobs are maybe freelance or contract, and your American peers may be able to do that and not have to worry about their sort of restrictions in terms of a visa. And so that's certainly something that you want to, talk with Carrie, for example, or other folks in that office, just to be sure that you understand what you have to prove on paper and then what sort of opportunities you can pursue. And then, even considering if this is your first time living in the United States, how has it been for you? How are you taking care of yourself during this process? So these are just good kind of priming questions to think about at the beginning of this process. And it came from the Career Center at Georgetown, which the citation is down there at the bottom. So I wanted you to begin thinking about these questions, and then also figure out what you already have, right? And so as an international student navigating a new culture, you do offer a new perspective that some employers are really going to value. Your language skills are very important, especially if they're absolutely critical to the job that you are looking for. If you're looking to use maybe some other skills you've gained, you may run into visa restrictions and it may not be possible. So you just want to be clear on making sure that OPT is related to what you have been studying. And so if it is interpreting and translation, the jobs you're going to be looking at are going to need your language skills, and that is going to be an added bonus that you have. Also, number 3, the ability to be flexible and adaptable when change occurs and to handle new situations. That is being problem solvers, and that's really what every job is looking for to some extent. And I would imagine with the freelance kind of process, things may pop up, and if you're flexible and adaptable and you're able to roll with it, then you're going to have an easier time taking on those opportunities and even having those opportunities than maybe some of your peers who aren't able to adapt as quickly. So it's always good to, start from a positive place and realize what you have. And the world is an increasingly connected economy. And so finding your place in it could be in the United States or in your home country, but still applying a global perspective. So do keep that in mind. Okay, so I told you I would talk a little bit about the American job search process. And so here's sort of a flow chart to think about when you are job searching. So looking for what it is that you can do. So what are the job titles? What are the major duties? What kinds of companies hire for that? Build your network in those areas. And then find the openings relevant to you. Now, I know time is always of the essence, and the openings relevant to you may be limited in certain times of the year, or you're already into looking at those openings and you don't have a network, so I'm just giving you the big picture overview and then a few strategies later on that you can employ, particularly with building your network. So once you find those openings that fit for you, you would apply. And so you would need to have what I call marketing materials, which would include a resume, a cover letter, maybe a website of your work or samples of some kind. That's going to depend on the job and what they're looking for. Um, Typically, a resume and cover letter are pretty standard. And then, assuming all goes well, you would be asked for an interview, and there may be more than one. There may be a screening interview that's on the phone or using a webcam. You may be invited to an in-person interview. I don't know. That's going to depend on the particular employer. And so, I have on here start early, especially because you have your own timeline with regards to your visa restrictions and OPT. In addition, my website is right here, graduate.wfu.edu/professional development. It has a lot of additional resources on each of these sections. I kind of organized it in a similar fashion, so be sure to check that out. And I am also happy to share this slide with you. Like if you can't click on it from viewing it, you can always reach out to me via email, and I will send this to you so that you have access to it. So I definitely wanted you to know about that. All right, so we're kind of going from big picture, and now we're honing in a little bit more specifically. So when I think about working with international students, one of the ways that we try to conceptualize the job search is that you are really running on several tracks at the same time. That can feel particularly stressful, but I think if you only choose to focus on plan A, there's going to be more stress on the back end than if from the beginning you recognize that you need to run on these 4 tracks. So what are they? Track 1, employment in the United States using your OPT, which could be an internship or a full-time job for 1 to 2 years, maybe more if you're in a STEM field. That is often what international students come to career coaching wanting to do. And so then I also take a moment and talk about the other tracks. So track 2 would be employment in your home country, because then you don't have to worry about your visa status. It's possible that there is a U.S. company operating in your home country, and vice versa, and you may be able to be hired without visa restrictions through your home country to work somewhere else. That just takes a little bit more research, but I do want you to know what your options are back in your home country where a visa isn't a restriction. Track 3 would be to look for additional education to stay in the United States, because then you can have that student visa. I'm of the opinion that you only want to get education if it's relevant to your future goals. And so I'd be happy to talk with you more about that. But it's certainly a track to consider, and it's going to have its own timeline. And you know that as a current master's student, that there will be deadlines and then decisions to be made for all of that. So if that's a track that's in your options, you need to, stay abreast with the deadlines for it. And then the 4th track that I can think of, and you might have others, is employment in the U.S. that's eligible for H-1B visa sponsorship. That's sort of the long-term, you're not restricted to your OPT parameters, but you're actually employed in the United States as long as the H-1B visa is held up. And so often, again, that like track 1 and track 4 tend to be what students come to me for originally, and I just try to expand their options a little bit just so that we are spending some time on all 4 tracks and not all of our time on just one track, because we don't know how it's going to go. And I have a little bit more information on the H-1B visa process in a moment. Hope that this is making sense to you. And again, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me via email. I think my email is in here. If not, I'll certainly add it to the YouTube link. Okay, so during your 12-month OPT period, you need to be employed at least 20 hours per week in activities directly related to your major. So you can pursue things that are freelance contractor or a postdoc, intern, temporary. They're possible. You may even be able to put something together with multiple employers, or pursue things like gigs, which could be temp contract kind of work. Some people even do self-employment. You just have to be able to show that it's actively related to what you have been trained to do. It's related to the education that you are completing right now. Volunteer service may also be a possibility, and working in an agency or consulting firm. So there is a bit of flexibility. You just have to be able to document it appropriately and stay in touch with the folks in the international office and know your deadlines. I think that is something I definitely want to hit home. And, the good news is you're not limited to only that full-time salaried staff kind of position or full-time internship for, the summer kind of thing. There is a bit more flexibility to really find the jobs that are most appropriate to your field. So that being said, let's keep going. Okay, so this is a flow chart just to help you think of where you are in the job search. So for example, at the top is where we're starting, right? And so often we have this search going on and we're seeing what's coming up, and maybe we get a full-time job offer, okay? And you still have the option to accept it or not. If you don't accept the full-time offer and that's all that you have on the table, then you're exiting the United States, right? That's a pretty short kind of trajectory. If you receive a full-time offer and accept it, then you would be going into the H-1B lottery. And that lottery is really outside of your control, and there is its own timeline for that as well. And so then let's say, yes, you do get through the H-1B lottery, then you are able to apply for permanent residence and have that H-1B visa status. If not, then even though you have accepted the full-time offer and they wanted you, the employer, can't actually hire you because you didn't make it through the lottery and you still have to exit the U.S. So hopefully this is hitting home that idea of running on multiple tracks, because this, again, is what often people are looking for, and it still may end with needing to exit the USA, and so you want to have another option. So going back to the, hold on here. Okay, I'm going to get that out of the way. Whoops. So if you are pursuing an internship and get an offer and do it, that's fine. It goes under your OPT parameters, right? You've adhered to the deadlines, you've gotten it secured, great. And then does that internship lead to a full-time job offer? Yes? Okay, then we jump over here and we've already done that. No? Then you still can see if you can seek a role if you have any OPT time left, or you would be exiting the US, right? If you have additional time and it fits within the timeline, then you could, keep looking for that full-time offer. That sometimes is through maybe networking or other means, just to see what you can do. And then, if you've done this search and you've uncovered as many leads as possible and you still haven't received an offer, then exiting the US. So wherever you see that purple of exit the USA, that's where I need you to also be aware of your other options and run on those tracks somewhat simultaneously, and really be treating this process as like a job. So looking at your week, I know you've got a lot going on as students. Spring semester is very hectic with your own class assignments, but really looking at carving out certain hours each day and each week toward this process so that nothing kind of falls to the wayside. And again, I will share the slides with you if you want to come back to this. Okay, so here's some additional resources. Again, I have taken this from websites. I am not an immigration attorney. I don't work in the international students office. I just want you to see what's out there. And so this is kind of the process for full-time jobs and looking for an H-1B visa position. And for those of us who are pursuing master's degrees, you fall in this category, right? So there's an annual cap that's set to $20,000 because you have an advanced degree. So there's this sort of additional pool of candidates because of the advanced degree. So that's to your benefit. But here is one thing to just notice. For so fiscal year 2017, they received 236,000 applications for the 20,000 spots. So that's really hard. I'm not sure the number of, ratio, because I can't do math that quickly, but you could do it, to kind of see, wow, only one in so many people actually get through the lottery. Now, in addition to the lottery, there are options for H-1Bs that are in exempt settings, like higher education, and I've included a link here just to see the other exempt employers. And of course, if you have skills that match those and there are job needs in an exempt setting, then that's, a great place to hone in and spend a little bit of time. Higher education often includes like teaching positions, but there may be maybe some hospital systems that want translators and interpreters that are university hospitals, and so there may be ways to get into these sort of exempt settings and give yourself some additional options. So again, that's just doing your research ahead of time in terms of that H-1B path. Okay? And so another question that comes up often is, when in the job search do I mention that I'm an international student with a student status at this point, and kind of the process. And so this links you to an article that I found addressing this very thing, and I hope that you'll read the whole thing. But really, the cover letter, I think, is the best place. So first of all, in your resume, or CV preparation, I would definitely not mention your student status. Now, some people may jump to conclusions based on your name or maybe your undergraduate institution, and perhaps there will be some decisions made at that point. We can't control how people view our materials. We just need to be factual about them. And I think so on here I have resume versus CV. So often coming from another country, your application process is to submit a CV. In the United States, a CV is really just used for academic type positions, particularly like academic teaching or academic research positions. A resume is going to be much more common for almost every other industry in the United States. I have some examples and some information on our website about resumes. You can always reach out to me individually to work on your resume, but definitely try to focus on having a resume versus a CV for pursuing positions that would qualify under OPT. And then, of course, if you're submitting a cover letter as well, I think the really important thing is to focus on your selling points. What are your strengths? We talked about maybe adaptability and flexibility, maybe that global perspective, maybe your language skills and opportunities to have already done translation and interpreting through your program or even before. You're focusing on all of that and trying to match that as close as you can with the job at hand, the job description that you have in front of you. So really trying to blend the two together, your own story, your resume, with what they're looking for and what you know about their organization. And you can use this phrase maybe toward the end when you're talking about hoping that you'll get called for an interview. You can say, I have a 1-year employment authorization which requires absolutely no work on your part. And so that should allow them to still consider you, unless they're a company that from the get-go has said, if you now or in the future are going to require sponsorship, we are not interested or able, to look at your application. Don't spend your time on those. Look for the ones that are okay with handling this process. Also, sponsoring versus petition. Sometimes petitioning feels a little bit less money oriented and less less that the stakes are high, I guess. I'm sorry, I'm not explaining that very well. But based on some of my research, using that word petition, even in the interview process, can sometimes make it feel a little bit less stressful for the employer. If this is new for the employer and they're open to it, then it's really on you to explain it as, here are the steps, and I'm able to help and provide insight this way, and I have the support of my university for these things, and here's all you need to do, right? So just being as straightforward as possible. And then, based on their questions, you want to be as straightforward and clear as possible. So you need to be really clear on your deadlines and your parameters and the kind of position and how it's connected to your studies and all of that, and then just present it. But I would say, in the application process, only answer things that are required, and in the cover letter, focus on that 1 year of employment authorization. especially if it's an internship or fellowship. If it's a full-time job, you might even leave that off and just wait and see if you have the opportunity to interview, and then be ready in your language in a phone interview or a in-person interview to talk about that idea of petitioning and what that looks like. I did want to spend a few minutes talking about culture considerations in the United States, just to, again, kind of give you a frame of reference for doing a job search in the U.S. and how some things are maybe a little more unique and different than your home culture. So first of all, in the United States, it's really on you to be proactive and intentional in your search. People don't go around recruiting for you very often. There is that role in human resources called a recruiter, but they are able to respond so much to all the people coming at them that they don't necessarily have to go out and find people. So as a motivated job seeker, it's on you to give yourself time to do this work. Remember and maybe put in your calendar when to follow up with people, when are the deadlines for jobs that you've already applied for, when might you want to contact to follow up and see if they've filled that position, different things like that. It all kind of falls on you as the job seeker. Another thing that is maybe unique to the United States is that people really do hire people they know. 70% of jobs come through some form of networking. So the relationships that you're able to build through professors and guest speakers and internship supervisors and even your classmates and who they know, that's really important. You can work with me. You can be in Handshake, which is the Wake Forest sort of job board, to see what's in there, and then, follow up with me and say, hey, I noticed this company, they have a job, but I don't know anyone there. Do you have any ideas for me? And then the other thing that I might consider is being on LinkedIn, which is a social media for professional networking. It allows you to have kind of an example of your work and your skills, but then also for you to reach out to people who are working in some of the places that you want to be, write them a message, and begin starting that conversation. So again, that's being very proactive, not waiting for people to introduce themselves to you, and really just allowing you to kind of take control of that and pursue people. Now, you don't want to be pushy or presumptuous that they're going to give you a job, but you certainly want to remember that relationships matter, and certain people are going to need to know you to give you the opportunities. The other thing that is very true in the U.S. that may feel a bit foreign or frustrating for people who aren't from this culture is that you need to know what you're selling and look for ways to tell your story. So this idea of self-promotion is sort of specific in the United States and expected. So no one else is going to come into the interview space with you and say, she is really great because of X, Y, and Z. Now, you may not say, I'm really great because of X, Y, and Z. You may try to frame that in more of like a story to say, one of my strengths really is being able to translate certain documents with high efficiency. And so, for example, in my internship, I was given these 3 documents and this kind of timeline, and I completed it ahead of the timeline and got positive feedback from the supervisor, right? So that's kind of a story to prove one of the things that I'm selling that you are looking to buy as an employer. So that might take a couple times to think through of like what is self-promotion and how do I do it. But then again, the article below here gives you some additional ideas to just kind of keep this in the forefront of your mind. It may feel a little bit foreign to you, and I'm always of the opinion of trying to be as authentic as possible in the job search, and this might feel very inauthentic, but that would be kind of the caveat. I would say, well, don't forget that in the U.S. these things are true, and so you may have to kind of fake it a little bit at the front end until you've had some practice with the self-promotion, the networking, and the intentional searching. So it's just good to be aware of that difference. So let's talk about networking because it always makes people nervous. I really try to say, let's not even call it networking. Let's just call it building relationships. And so really you just want to find people to meet, and here are some ideas of where you might look for them. So I have LinkedIn on there, professional associations. So I know that there's some local and national ones for interpreting and translation, those would be great places to try and find people maybe who are also from your same home country but are working in the US. You may be able to see their profiles on LinkedIn to know how they got to that place. If you can identify someone and you see their story or what you know about them and you know, hey, I'd really love to talk with them, I think they could be helpful, then you may want to do what we call an informational interview. And again, this is a clickable link that I can send you. And as you look at just the definition, it's basically asking them for a little bit of their time to tell you what advice they have, how they got to where they are now, how did they get started, what was true for them in the job search, how did they talk about their international status, etc. And so you may not even call it an informational interview. That's just kind of our career language, but it's basically interviewing them, you planning the questions to ask them to get information. So it is not to get a job, and it is not to assume they're going to help you get a job. It's really just trying to add to your perspective and hopefully be able to share a little bit about yourself. And then, of course, as you get closer to the end of that time with them, based on what you've learned, you may come up with some sort of next step. And then you can follow up with a thank you note, maybe say, you mentioned you would be willing to look at my resume, and so I've attached it to this email, or you mentioned that you wanted to think about who I maybe should meet with next and would love to set that up if possible. Please let me know, whatever it might be. And so you are able to then do a follow-up and start to build them into your network. Keep them updated. So maybe you meet with them now because they were a guest speaker and you followed up and you had the time to talk with them. You thought, wow, they're really helpful, but I'm still, 4 months out from needing a job. And so I'm not sure what to say to them. Do a thank you. Maybe send them your resume, ask for feedback, and then keep doing your job search. And as you come across companies, maybe reach back out to that person and say, hey, by the way, do you know anybody who works here, anybody who's had this kind of experience? Because this seems to be where the openings are, and I'm interested in making some additional connections. It's much easier to go to someone who you've already met to give them an update on your job search, and they're a little bit more invested in your future success. So again, start early, do it often. Think of it more in the long term of relationship building, and it may not happen overnight. And so again, I know that's very hard to tell someone who has this like ticking time clock of OPT. And so, if you can be watching this at the very front end of your graduate degree, then more power to you. And so hopefully that will be the case going forward. Here's a couple specific groups, and again, I will attach a link to the slides, so these are all going to be clickable for you, but these might be some specific groups on LinkedIn that you may want to join yourself and then look at who the members are and maybe throw in a keyword to search through members who are in San Francisco or who have the title of Translator 1 or whatever the specific job titles might be that you are looking for. And I've included in here just for sake of I guess scope how many members are in them. And so the bigger it is, the more power there is to have this like second connection. But at the same time, if everyone in the CATI group, the 86 members that are there, are much more active and willing to engage with you, then it's hard to say that just a high number makes it the most valuable. So I don't think you have to just join, pros.com, for example. You may want to join all of them and just start to see what kind of activity. Sometimes you can ask a question, maybe related to your thesis or research that you're doing, and just start a conversation that way. And then whoever answers, you may follow up and say, hey, thanks so much for answering that question on the group. I wanted to follow up and maybe learn a little bit more about you. And then, that same idea of creating an informational interview. So there are ways to use groups in order to find additional people, and LinkedIn just seems to be one of those spaces that works really well. In addition to LinkedIn, having an online presence is really helpful, especially for this field where it is a lot of freelance and kind of building your own reputation. And so you want to check Google and see what shows up about your first and last name. How many of those are actually about you. And then you want to maybe include purposeful status updates in the social media that you're on. So if you're on Twitter and LinkedIn and you come across an article about, the state of translation in hospital systems, you can put that out there. It doesn't even have to be original content that you come up with. You may just be sharing a relevant news story to your network, and that shows even just some expertise in your subject area, which is good just to kind of spark conversations. About.me is a cool website just to pull all of the different places that you are online and give you like one URL that you could then put into an email signature or mention in your cover letter or put on your resume just to drive people to you, particularly if you have a common name. And so typing in that name into Google gets a whole lot of people that aren't you. So maybe about.me might be really helpful. Or even creating your own website. So I've listed a few here, and you can just Google what those are. They have a lot of free resources, and then, to upgrade, if you want to own your specific URL, I think you can buy them. If, again, this is something that you can see doing long term, it might be worth to do on the front end. And then also, there are niche websites, and we've talked about pros.com already, but Translators Cafe, where you can have a profile, and so you should be in spaces where people are looking for your skills. And if you have others, please make a comment on the YouTube or email me, because I would love to add to just this knowledge base. So you do want to try to connect online, and again, as early and as often as you can. Okay, so let's just talk through the process a little bit. Again, this is specific to America, but you might do a phone call with a recruiter at the very front end. That person may not be hiring, may not be your supervisor in the future. They may be working in human resources and really just trying to understand who you are and how you fit with the job description. So if you get this far, it means they liked your material. So do keep that in mind. They like what they saw on your resume. They maybe like what they saw in your cover letter. Maybe something online that they saw of you they liked, and now they want to talk to you. And then, of course, you want to keep the good feelings going so that the recruiter gives good information to the hiring manager and you're asked for an interview. And then depending on the kind of positions you're looking for, there may be assessments to test your skills. So perhaps they want you to translate a document for them kind of in a timed method, or in front of them or whatever, just to sort of prove your skill set. So you do want to be ready for that. And then you may have another interview with additional people that are stakeholders in the decision, and then they would get to a decision and give you an offer, and you with them could decide the hire date and if you take it. And so again, this is big picture for typical jobs. So some of those freelance opportunities might skip some of these steps, might have other steps. Might be shorter, might take longer, I'm not sure. And so just again, kind of an overview idea. And something else that's pretty common in the United States is to greet people with a handshake. A proper handshake is looking at your hand, kind of the webs between your thumb and your first finger, and trying to make direct contact with the other person's webbing of their hand between their first finger and their thumb. And then just doing maybe a couple confident pumps of the arm up and down with some good eye contact, maybe greeting them by name, and then letting go of your hand. So just to be kind of funny, there are lots of really bad handshakes out there, like the Queen, which is barely touching someone and maybe assuming that they would kiss your hand or something. The thief's glove is kind of two hands and a bit sort of schmoozing in a way that's not very genuine. The wet fish is if you're very, very sweaty when you're nervous and, your hands are going to be very clammy. Sometimes that can't be helped because we're just human and we all have our own, nervousness. But one strategy that I was told a long time ago is perhaps put a little bit of powder in a pocket of your pants, and then, before the big time where you're going to shake someone's hand, just put your hand in your pocket and kind of rub it a little bit so it's not quite as clammy. And then don't look at your hand and focus on it. Just do the confident pumps with good eye contact and then let go and move on. The Terminator is that sort of death grip, which men tend to have more of an issue with than women. A handshake is showing confidence and sometimes power. So you do want to be confident with a good amount of pressure, but you don't want to be bone crushing, I guess. And I would just say practice with other people that you feel like have good handshakes. I do that in appointments with people. I will practice their handshakes occasionally, and especially if we do training on interviews. But I just wanted to speak to this because it's one of those American cultural things that I just want you to be prepared for and kind of know the rules so that you play the game correctly. And now I want to get into a few resources that Wake Forest has at your disposal that I hope you are aware of and using in this process. So Handshake and Career Shift over here on the left side, those are both what we call job boards. So as a job is open, a specific need, it might be posted on either of these. So Handshake is going to be just for Wake Forest students. So you'll sign in with your wfu.edu email, and they'll ask you to create a profile, which I recommend filling in all the things they ask for. And then, just do a couple searches with keywords that are true for your industry. So it might be translator or linguist or interpreting, or Chinese or Spanish, whatever the specific words are that help you find the jobs that you might be relevant for. See what's in Handshake. I will say that Handshake is primarily focused on some of the undergraduate majors more than the graduate school, so sometimes it's hit or miss. And you'll be listed as a graduate student, so you will see if the jobs match the criteria, like of your educational level. So, I think it's good to get used to. The other benefit of Handshake is it lists all employers who are coming to our career fairs that are on campus. It also lists any company representatives who are coming to talk to students. So you may want to know if Wake Forest Baptist Hospital is sending people to talk to students in a certain area. You could potentially go to that and then have a meet and greet and say, well, you came to talk specifically about the Health and Exercise Science Division. I'm aware that you have translators, and I'm wondering if you know anyone in that department. Would love to get connected, kind of idea. So that's an option there. And it's just looking under events in Handshake to see what's happening on campus. And then Career Shift is a subscription tool that it basically just collects data across the web of company websites and the pages where they've posted the job. And so you type in a certain keyword, and they're going to show you that maybe it popped up on Indeed.com, but it also popped on like Pepsi.com/career. So it's always going to show you where it came from. And so there might be some more there. You can also, in Career Shift, choose a geographic location. Like if you're here in North Carolina, but you want to work in San Francisco, you can type in the San Francisco metropolitan area and then some keywords, and you'll find a lot more opportunities than you might in Handshake. Okay, Going Global is a pretty useful resource for both domestic students who want to go abroad, but also for international students who want to be in the U.S. So under the Going Global tab, you should be able to view the H-1B visa database. And so the thing about this is it's a list of companies who have requested sponsorship in the past. Or petitions, excuse me. So they basically liked a candidate who needed a visa and submitted that petition to the lottery. So it doesn't say whether they got approved, because the lottery, is different every year. But it at least can show you companies who were willing to sponsor. And so that might be a neat supplement to your search. So for example, if you found a company in Career Shift, maybe also look up that company in Going Global just to see if they're there. And it may be hit or miss, but it's certainly a resource that's worth getting used to. And then Interview Stream is, again, through our website, and you'll use your WFU.edu email to create an account. That password can be anything you want, and once you log in, you can start to choose maybe a sample interview. And basically how it works is that there's a recorded person asking a question, and then the webcam on your computer will kick on and allow you to answer that question. And then you hit stop, and you can review it yourself. You can send that link to a trusted advisor, a mentor, a classmate, if you want to get some additional feedback on how you might make that question or the answer even stronger. People have sent me the link before because they are having trouble with figuring out what to say. I like Interview Stream because it's available 24/7. So if suddenly you have an interview the next day, you can jump on Interview Stream and just practice maybe some of the common questions. I've created a sample graduate student interview that may be a good place to start for you. And then you can always search. There's a bank of like 7,000 questions, and you can search. I have not been able to do that yet for specific translators or interpreter jobs, but you could certainly do that just to see if they had any questions. And there's some information in Interview Stream about illegal questions, and I would recommend that you familiarize yourself with what they're allowed to ask and what they're not allowed to ask in the interview, just to advocate for yourself in that process. Particularly, if your name seems, very Chinese or very Spanish, for example, you may want to be aware of what questions they can ask and can't in terms of discrimination. And you always want to remember that if you've been called in for an interview, then you met criteria for something and that they have a positive impression of you. And so you just want to keep that positive impression going. So Interview Stream is another good preparation tool. And then as you research companies, there's a couple links here that I recommend. So one is that the library does have a subject guide on industry information, and you can always reach out to that librarian. They're really great. There's like a chat feature, and you may have used some of the librarian resources in papers that you've already completed, but you can also, request some information for your own job search. And then My Visa Jobs is a website that you can sort by state, industry, and job title. So that's another method in the research process. And then I am available to meet with you. I do my appointments virtually using WebEx, which is what I'm recording this in right now, and have a variety of availability in the mornings, and then I work Wednesday afternoons, and all that availability is available at this website. You can just select a time that works for you. If you don't find one there, then certainly email me with your specific question, and we can figure out the best method for what to do next. But these are just kind of other topics that you may want to go deeper or further into your own specific issues, and we can address them in an appointment. So I am available to you. Again, my name is Linda Whited, and I would love to help you as much as I can. And I wanted to include this list. Again, when I save the PDF, these should all be clickable, but these are basically where I got my information, because again, I don't want to send you thinking that I am an expert in a certain area when in fact I am just using my resources. So I'm going to stop sharing now. This is actually going to end the recording, and I really appreciate your time and attention. And again, feel free to email me with any questions that you have.